Welcome back to Energy Watch Party, the podcast that is not dead. We are still doing episodes.
It really felt like it was dead. I had to try to remind him to get back going again.
Well, it's we're not going to get into it, but we are still doing it, and we have many things to talk about still. And hopefully you find these topics as interesting as we do, thus why we're doing the podcast. And today's topic is kind of a two-parter, not in the same video, but it'll be followed up with its indirect second part. And today's topic is going to be the kind of what makes a TV show good, which I think is TV show is a very broad term nowadays because of there's like classic TV, it was aired on a network, over the air, whatever. There's streaming now. There's like miniseries, all this stuff. So it's a broad term, but I think they all should have the same type of base, like pillars for it.
Standards is the word you're looking.
Well, standards, but it's kind of more than that because you need certain things there to make it work. Kind of like, we talked about this the other day, those, what do they call them? The pillars of storytelling. It was like, we couldn't figure out the fourth one was like plot, characters, all this stuff. If they're not there, you don't have a story. You certainly don't have quality. And I think for the most part, a lot of TV has gone downhill recently.
Yeah.
I think the average quality of TV shows, like, this decade versus last decade is down. But on the flip side of that, you get to pick what you want more, right? Like, because of streaming and on demand, you're not wasting your time on the bad stuff. You're only watching the good stuff, hopefully.
Yeah. I also want to say, I think that the highs can be like a little bit higher than they were back in the day just because of modern techniques and a lot of, new ideas that get introduced that couldn't have been before.
Mm-hmm. And streaming also kind of allows for like the R rating on some shows that couldn't have it before. So it's more of a do the vision to its fullest rather than trying to fit in the
pandering
box.
Can't pander to the network. Well, you can, but less pandering to the network.
Yeah. So the most recent example or kind of the thing that brought upon this premise for an episode here is I am currently watching Superman and Lois season 4.
Yeah,
it's the fourth and final one.
Just for context, Nick here has made it his mission to watch everything DC, which is why he has gone through basically everything. So I'm sure it'll come up quite a bit as we talk.
Yeah. So no, it doesn't matter how bad you've heard it was. I'm still going to watch it. I watched Gotham Knights live. I sat through all of Batwoman. And I saw Catwoman, the movie, unfortunately. Seen pretty much every single, I think to now I'm all caught up. I've seen every single DC animated movie ever released. That's a different video. That's probably going to be a tier list. That'll be fun. Ooh. But anyway, Superman and Lois season 4. And I was very confused because I think even you listening to this video and even you, you heard that this show was good, non-stop praise, right?
I heard that Superman fans enjoyed it,
which is interesting because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the average Superman fan is like. I would just assume they like good Superman content. As a Batman fan, I'm not there necessarily for the plot and story. As long as Batman's cool and done right, I don't exactly care. Like, I give, a lot of the DC AMU movies like an 8 out of 10 that have Batman in it, and they're not the like greatest, but they know who their audience is, and they give you exactly what you want. So I really like it.
I don't think anything like this including the shows, have to be the pinnacle of storytelling. The first thing a show should be is entertaining, right?
Right.
People often like to watch bad movies because they find them entertaining.
Right. You can still be entertaining because there's some value there. But in Superman and Lois's case, I'm finding there to be way too many negative distractions that take away from any possible enjoyment I could have, or I guess overall enjoyment, because there is some enjoyment there. Some things work, but every time I find myself getting into it, liking it, oh, this character's working for me. I like what's going on here. Immediate cut to someone that isn't working for me, that I don't like. And it happens every time. It happened a lot in seasons 1 and 2, which I overall liked. And then season 3 completely dropped it. And it was mostly things I didn't like. And season 4 so far is even worse. And there was just it got me thinking about certain things. So I read the reviews for these episodes and I see the ratings that these episodes are getting on season 4. And they are high. Like one of them, I won't do any spoilers, but one of the more recent ones, or I guess they're all kind of recent, but one of the ones in the beginning, which I thought was pretty dumb, got like a 8.9 or something, which is insanely good. And I was reading the reviews and I did not understand. These people were talking about seeing the greatest episode they have ever seen in any TV show ever. And I was just sitting there thinking, did I miss something? Am I the one who's wrong? I do this every time because when you're in the minority of like an opinion, you start to question yourself. You're like, why am I not seeing the same thing that these people are seeing? And I was really questioning it. And then I was listening to the Talkville podcast. For those who don't know, is Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum's Smallville rewatch podcast. They were the main stars on the show. And they're going back and watching every episode. And it's really interesting because you get to hear that perspective of them on set, filming each episode, their opinions of the show. It was like 15 years ago now that they did it, or actually even longer. It was like 20 years ago for the certain seasons. But, and you start to hear things when they bring up critiques and criticisms about certain characters and plot points that they don't care for and all this stuff. And even the things that they don't like in that show that I would agree with or I would disagree with, but I know what they're talking about, those are the problems I wish Superman and Lois had. Though that show's problems are way bigger. And it all comes down to the writing, but specifically for characters in this case, because this show is all character. Both of those shows are all characters. But the biggest difference is good writing for characters, bad writing for characters. And
I think, I just want to put this, the first big point I think I want to make is, I think a bad show can be saved by good characters.
I think so. I mean,
and a good show can be made awful by bad characters.
Right. So that's kind of the crux, I guess, of Superman and Lois. That show is 100% characters. Season 1 and 2 were saved for me because I chose to invest more in the good characters, the characters that I liked, and I bought what they were doing, what they were going for, over the bad characters, which didn't make sense to me, and I didn't care. So I think it was more of a 50-50 split, if I'm being really honest, but I chose to give it the boost on the characters I liked. Season 5 made it way too, or not 5. Season 3 made it way too difficult for me to do that. So I ended up giving it a 5 out of 10. Because I just couldn't do it. You get it half. Barely. And season 4 is headed for like a 4 at this point. But, it's, I think a big, you would have to see Smallville. You have to see both these shows to know exactly what I'm talking about. The way Clark Kent's character is written in Smallville is he was super relatable. It came out at a time when a lot of people, it knew its market. It came out at a time a lot of people were in high school. It was targeted toward teens. Clark was a teenager, trying to figure out all of this stuff. He's dealing with parents, friend issues, all this stuff. And on top of all of that, you had the Superman, twist to it. He's got powers. He's got to fight these villains, or they call him the Freak of the Week. But it was entertaining. It was relatable, and it just had a lot of like heart to it, I guess, because there was like the whole family dynamic, which Superman and Lois tries to do. You have Superman, you have Lois, you have the two kids, which you would think is just a one-to-one, because the kids are in high school, right? So why isn't that relatable? It's because what they're doing is not relatable. How do you relate to Jordan, who just complains about everything all the time, and then he has powers, and he wants to go be a superhero behind Superman's back, but he doesn't want to do it to save people. He literally says in the show, I want the attention. He goes up, he does his stupid save or whatever he's doing, and then he stands around and takes pictures of people. And then Superman says, you don't understand what it means to be a hero. You can't use your powers this way. And he benches him. And then Jordan throws a tantrum. Which part of that is relatable to you as a viewer, assuming you were around the same age?
Well, assuming you're the same age as Superman here, it sounds like if you have to deal with a brat kid.
I mean, maybe that's what they're going for. I don't know.
I don't think, though, that if you're watching a TV show, you want to be reminded of your brat kid who doesn't listen and also, is so self-centered that they're going against your word to fulfill their own selfish desires. I don't think, as a parent, that's something you want to be reminded of.
They are terrible parents in this show. This is not how you do parenting. It is all, like, this is how you get your kids to hate you. Like, there's discipline, and then there's just being, like, a jerk. Like, every time these kids do something that the parents don't want, it's not, hey, let's talk about it and figure this out, work with the kid. They just say no. They try to act all tough. They act stern, and they just say, no, you can't do that. I'm your parent. You need to listen to me. And that is it. Of course, these kids are going to hate them. Why wouldn't you?
They don't even provide reasoning.
Well, if they do, it's not so much reasoning as it is, this is why you're not going to do it. But there's no point in the reasoning because you can't argue that point. That's it. Like, it doesn't matter if they give a reason or not if it doesn't make any difference, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Because
it would be nice to at least know.
They kind of, it's not a spoiler because they talk about this multiple times throughout the show, but about giving Superman's identity, right? They're talking about, because the kids want to have a normal life, and so if certain people that they knew about their, superpower, parts of the family, it would make it a lot easier. And then Superman just straight up tells him, he's like, no, you can't do that. You can't tell him, and that's it. And so the kids are like, all right, I guess my life's ruined. I can't have any real connections with anybody.
Wait, they want a normal life. So they want to tell people they have superpowers.
Well, in case of like Jordan, he had to keep hiding. You know how it is it's in every superhero show.
Yeah.
Hide your abilities. And then when you have to slip out or do whatever, you got to make up an excuse or a lie. And it just,
But having superpowers does not lead to a normal life. I can see what you're talking about. I haven't even watched the show. I'd hate these characters.
Well, that's the other thing. But I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm not saying like in that specific case that Jordan, if he got his way, it would be a better show and there'd be better characters. I'm just saying, using this as a point, the parents are horrible. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Oh,
You're gonna need to say that again.
Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. That's not how you go about it. You explain it. You know how many nice moments there could have been in this show if they had the father-son thing. It's like, hey, come on, let's go for a walk, or let's go fly around a little bit or something, and let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Superman does not come off as a caring dad. He just comes off as like the stereotypical. He comes off as Captain America. Let's put it that way.
Oh, God.
He's like, I'm not going to listen to anyone else. You do what I say because I'm Superman. That's not how Superman's supposed to be.
No, Superman is like the absolute antithesis to that. He's the guy who sits down and listens to someone complain about their day for like 3 hours and then offers them advice and,
because
just helps them out.
He's supposed to know he's not the smartest person in the room. He's just the strongest person in the room. He knows that. That's part of his character. That's why he has so much respect for Batman every time, especially when Batman's just straight up being a jerk to him. Superman still listens to him. Doesn't matter. Because he's smart. He's smart enough to listen to the smarter people.
Yeah, Superman knows his thing is kindness.
Yeah, and Lois was done even worse. She's just straight up... I feel like the only thing they wrote on her paper, like, character-wise, was just be a jerk to everyone who talks to you. It's absolutely ridiculous. You should not, I'm not saying Lois Lane is the most likable character ever in DC, but she shouldn't be this unlikable. And I'm not just hating on her to hate on her. You actually have made me dislike her just because there's nothing to like. That's how you wrote the character, so that's what I got from it. And Lex Luthor's even worse, I guess. I don't know. Lex Luthor's problem is that he's not Lex Luthor. He has a grudge against Superman and Lois because he got put in prison wrongfully or whatever from them. So when he gets out of prison, he decides to take his revenge on Superman. But how would you think he would go about it? What would be when you think of Lex Luthor, what do you think he would do to Superman to get revenge on him for like a 16-year-old plan, right? He's been playing 16 years to get his revenge on Superman and his family. How do you think
political maneuvering, probably? Maybe hiring somebody to take out Superman?
Okay. Is it like getting someone out there going trying to
playing either the social game and trying to, win public favor away from Superman and then trying to slander him later, or trying to just get him off the board. That just sounds like, yeah.
Okay. Do you think in that plan, does buying the apartment across from where Lois Lane works in Smallville and staying there just so you can go to your window every night and stare at Lois Lane's building, does that fall into his plan, you think?
I mean, if he wants to invest in real estate, I don't think that's part of his plan.
In an apartment building in Smallville. You think that...
Who knows? Maybe he's going to bring stuff to Smallville. Maybe that's his plan.
Why does he care at all about Smallville?
I don't know. He grew up there.
He did.
Nothing to do with Superman.
Well, Lex Luthor didn't grow up there. He owns Metropolis. What does he care about Smallville?
No, he wants to own Smallville. He wants the Blu-ray box set.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid. And then he walks into a bar. It sounds like a bad joke, but he walks into a bar and he's trying to buy, he wants to buy like farmland so he can put like his factory there or something.
Right.
I don't know what he's trying to do, but he's trying to buy the farmland from some family. So he's offering him like, I don't know, $10 million or whatever. And he wants to buy it. And then Clark talks to her and he's like, you can't do it. If you let Lex Luthor in this town, it's only going to be bad for everyone. So then she decides not to sell. And then Lex Luthor,
Wait, I thought Luthor was like, for all his faults, was actually an economically sound businessman.
Well, you would think so. I mean, sure, he inherited it, but it's always implied that his company thrives under his leadership.
Yeah.
Always implied. So then he goes into the bar where the lady is and where Clark is, and he makes a big scene. He walks in with his leather jacket, because that's what Lex Luthor wears now. When he goes, you know what? Why didn't you take my deal? I'm going to offer you $20 million to buy it instead. And then I'm going to offer $5 million to everyone in this room who turns against Clark. Or something like that. Or like just be on my team.
Does he know that Clark is Superman?
I think he does at this point, but he I don't know. But basically they just do this whole scene where the whole town stands up to him. He's like, you know what? We're not going to take your money. You need to leave. And then so he's like,
Yeah.
fine, I'll take my money and go somewhere else. And he walks out.
I didn't know that Lex Luthor was 5 years old.
Dude, it's like, it's exactly how a rich kid would act at like a school, right? Like an 8th grade rich kid at like a boarding school would just be like throwing money around. It's like, I want that. I'll give you $1,000 or whatever.
Reminds me of Draco Malfoy. My father will hear about this.
If his father was still alive, or if this was like the young version of like, if we were just following the kids and it was like Lex Luthor's son or whatever, that's fully what he would say. I don't know. There's multiple examples of this. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about Superman and Lois' stupid moments, but basically that's what I'm dealing with. It's not a good show. Objectively, I don't think it's a good show, especially season 4. There's so many problems with the characters. They're not likable when they should be. They're trying their hardest to get you to care and believe in what they're doing, and it just does not work.
So a good show has to have good characters then, or at least has to not have abysmal characters that take you out of the show.
So a big difference between TV shows and movies, I think you can go a lot of different directions with movies, right? You can do this, you can do that. You can have genre. It depends on your genre. It depends on what your plot is. I think with the show, characters are always front and center.
Well, the thing with a show is that you're going to be going back to these same characters over and over again. Mm-hmm. So if those characters are not enjoyable to, watch, then what's the point of watching the wider show?
Name one show where the characters are not the most important part of it. Name one. I'm actually curious because I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I mean, like even stuff like Tom and Jerry or Looney Tunes, that was all like character-based humor for a lot of it.
Right, those are all characters. It's all comedy, but it doesn't work without the characters.
Yeah.
You can't put Joe and Bill and Tom and Jerry, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's Bugs Bunny. It's funny because it's Daffy Duck.
Yeah.
So, assuming we can't think of any single show where the characters are not the most important part, if you mess up your characters, you mess up your show.
Yeah.
Just as a relevant, modern, current example, we didn't finish watching The Penguin yet, but we're 2 episodes in.
Yeah.
I would argue the biggest strength, obviously, the characters. And then there's obviously other things like the intrigue and all this stuff. And then
the show's all about the characters. It knows its strength.
Every show is about the character. That's my point. So if you mess up your characters, you mess up your show. Penguin, a big part of this also, in this specific example, is acting. You have, I would say Colin Farrell's Penguin and then whoever's Sophia, like the 2 highlights, and they draw you in every scene that they're in. It's a longer episode, so they need to do that. You have good acting, and you have good writing. Brings you good characters. You're interested. You're watching. Now, it's not perfect all the time. I think in the last episode in particular, there was a bit of a lull in the plot. Wasn't moving as much, but that turns it from being great to like, this is fine, right? It's never bad because of the characters. Characters will, in this case so far, will save it from ever being bad because they're so good.
Well, after character, what would come next? What would be the second most important thing you would say?
Ooh, okay. I would say premise.
Premise, really?
Yes, because
okay,
like let's think of an example here. You want to do a Green Arrow show. Okay, you have your character already. That's step 1. It's going to be Green Arrow. You get Stephen Amell to do it. Okay. He's a good actor, and he does his auditions, whatever. You can see it. You can see him as Oliver Queen. You can see him as Green Arrow. He got that. What is he going to be doing? Probably fighting crime, because that's what Green Arrow does, right?
Yeah.
Okay? So now you're up to a 6 out of 10 show, because you got a good character, good, with a good actor, and he's going to be doing something that is, people would watch. But how long would they watch it?
Here's my question. Does a good premise really matter if the plot is bad? Because you can have the best premise in the world, but the show can fail if the plot does not succeed.
Well,
because I'm not just talking about like, episode or, big serialized shows, but in each individual episode of like an episodic show, each episode needs to have its plot.
right.
And you can build that plot around the premise. You should, but the plot itself needs to carry the episode.
Instead of plot, I would say writing, because you need that to fill all the little gaps. So I won't get into specifics, but like a show I'm writing, right? I start with an outline. I say, this is what I want to happen in the season overall. And then I break it down from there. This is the individual moments I want to happen in each episode, right?
Yep.
And then from there, you go smaller and smaller, and then you get to the point where you've written the whole script, every line of dialogue, everything that happens. So back to my example, I'll bring up Sonic Boom as my next example, because that's more of the episodic randomness. But with Arrow, your premise was the base what I said. So you need to add something in there that actually makes people want to watch it and come back to it and be invested in a season 2 and 3. So you got to round out your cast, which comes back to characters. It's all interconnected. You get the best friend, Tommy Merlin. You get the enemy, Malcolm Merlin. A great actor, interesting. You got to write all these characters interesting. You got to write them all interconnected. You get his mom, you get Thea. You add in a twist here where there's a 5-year, or what is it? I guess it's, 5 years ago flashback, right?
Yeah.
You flashbacks. You kind of add more to the character that way. You add depth to Oliver's character. Does he really want to be killing? Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? All this stuff. This is what adds depth to not just characters, but again, because the characters are the show. When you add depth to your characters, you add depth to your show. The plot comes there because it's interesting. It gives you things to do. But if you notice specifically in Arrow and a lot of other these shows that people like, but not like, they're not 10 out of 10s, the plots are pretty basic. They're pretty standard. They call them, I don't know what they call them, but they're formulaic, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's pretty standard, but it's all these other specific details that raise it up, right? You got to add in the little character moments. I don't know if it's it's the first episode, right? Where he has the birthday party across the street from the guy's, the guy's tower or whatever. And then he goes back to his party when it's done. You have Paul Blackthorne's character, which is the detective. And then he just goes off on Oliver, and it's revealed that it was his daughter that was killed 5 years ago. And it's like, boom. Now you just added a third thing, or not a third thing, but another thing where it's like the detective was going to be hunting Green Arrow, doesn't like Oliver, yet his daughter is Laurel, the one who survived, is friends with Oliver. So you got to have this interesting dynamic. It's like, that's how you do this stuff.
Basically what you're saying is you take a bunch of these random pieces and then you have them connect in ways that make the story more interesting.
Right.
What you do is you basically have all these puzzle pieces and you have to make connections every single way that you can in order to make things not only make more sense, but also more interesting.
Right. So I'd say like maybe your 3 pillars of TV shows would be characters, premise, and then plot, right? And then your things that would connect all of them would just be writing. Gotta have good writing. That's how it's like the filling, right? On your cake. The cake's good. That's the main thing, is the cake. But the filling brings it together.
Well, then what about Sonic Boom? That's the show you said you're going to talk about.
So, this is interesting. Again, cast of characters. There are 6. You have 6 characters. Only 11 minutes per episode, but there are 104 episodes.
Well, episode count doesn't exactly matter when it comes to this, because good shows can be of varying length.
Well, I think it does matter because of what we're dealing with here.
For an episodic show?
Yeah, so, well, this is my point. So something with Arrow is set in a giant city. There's 22 episodes, kind of long, but you have a lot of characters. You have a lot of characters, a lot of things going on. You introduce new characters each episode, right? Because you got to have a new villain. You can have guest stars, that kind of thing. It fills it out. So now let's take, I don't know what the time conversion is. So if there's 22 episodes, this one's got 52 episodes in Sonic Boom, 11 minutes. Point is, you only have 6 characters to work with. Sure, there are some other extras in there, some other characters, but the main cast is only 6. It's a comedy. Immediately, that's harder to do. There are only a handful of locations. It's like most scenes take place in like 4 to 6 locations. So based off of just the pieces, like, again, this is going to come down to premise in a second, but if you're pitching the show to someone to pick it up, you say, I got 6 characters, I got 6 locations. That doesn't sound great, right? You can be like, well, what can you do with that? That's going to be the immediately followed up question, right? So what can you do with that to make it interesting? And then you show them an episode. Then you show them 5 episodes. And they're like, I get it. So, again, this is an animated show. It's written extremely well, especially in the comedy area. It's hilarious. It's, what's the term? Meta? Where it knows what it is and it makes fun of itself.
That is being meta, yes.
Doesn't take itself seriously, but it's not cringe meta, where it's like they think they're being clever, but they're really not. It's actually, it's well done. The voice acting is key here, especially you'll get this in any animated show. If your voice actors can't do it, don't have it. The character, you don't buy the characters. And then the delivery is perfect. It's just extremely smart. It's not, I would say like 95% of it is not repetitive. It's all new, unique. You go from episode to episode. It's one of those shows you have fun with the first one, go to the second one. Fun with that one, you keep going. The reason that's a good example is, like I said, the limited tools you have to work with there. It highlights how important and how well those tools have to be crafted in order to get such 104 episodes, and they could have gone more easily. So it was basically a tiny bit of things to work with, 6 and 6, and the result is like unlimited potential, basically. And I think,
but it's only unlimited potential because of creativity.
Exactly. The premise, I would say in this case, is creativity, humorous creativity. There was 0 limitations on what they could do, with the exception of the cast they had and the places that they went. But they were so strong to begin with, if that was your biggest problem, you don't have any problems, right?
Right.
I think an example of a bad cast of characters or premise would, I guess, be Supergirl, I think, in the later seasons. And they kind of had this problem for a while, but so you wanted to do, I think the ultimate pitch for Supergirl was just they wanted to do a Superman show, and they weren't allowed to, or they decided to do Supergirl instead for demographic reasons. The problem was she was basically in Metropolis. It wasn't called Metropolis, but she was in Metropolis. All of her villains were Superman villains. And half of the supporting cast were Superman supporting cast. So why is it being Supergirl necessary? What does it add, the fact that she's Supergirl? So I think in that case your premise would be more flawed, because you didn't exactly have an original idea, and you didn't have like a game winning idea. You took a safe premise and swapped one piece, right? And so what you get is at best a safe 6 out of 10 show.
What about shows that, go all out with their premise and their characters, but the characters are just bad or annoying, or their premise is just on shaky foundation?
Do you have an example of this?
It's not a show I have seen personally, but it is a show I have definitely heard of. Have you ever heard of Has Been Hotel?
I think I have heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. It sounds familiar.
So basically, it was a show that was extremely hyped to be released. It got partnered with, I think, Netflix and everything. And the show comes out, and the plot is a mess. The characters they focus on are it's just very weird. They don't focus on the main character ever, basically, and they keep introducing new stuff. And it's an example of trying to do too much, almost. You could have had a solid premise, you could have had solid characters, but you tried to shove so much in there that it became overstuffed and everything falls apart.
Interesting. I think another one kind of along those lines would be Picard. Sounds like they had a good premise, but bad writing, which came out to bad execution, right?
Right.
If you were a Star Trek fan, which I'm not, and again, I haven't seen the show, but it sounds like Picard, the character, was one of the fan favorites. So he gets his own show. Immediately, you'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to watch that. But then it's poorly executed. The characters are written poorly. They add in characters that just don't add anything at all. And then they try to push, agendas with their plots and stuff. And it just takes away, it detracts from character moments. And then, that's before we even get to the extremes of things like character assassination, where you're taking these beloved characters and they are not acting like themselves at all. Which, Halo TV show.
To be fair, Halo TV show was exactly character assassination. It was more so that the characters were just aborted.
Halo TV show missed on every mark, with the exception of production. I think the production was good. It looked good. But everything else they missed. Bad characters, bad premise, bad locations, bad writing. You had nothing.
You're telling me you don't like The Chosen, Quan?
I do like... No, I don't. I don't like The Chosen, Quan. That episode was a Quan out of 10. It was not good. Can you believe that? 9 episodes in season 1, and one of them was dedicated to Quan exclusively. There was 0 Master Chief. There was 0 Covenant. There was 0 UNSC. There was 0 Halo. What a genius move.
Well, it's not like it was a Halo show or anything.
Wow. And so for those of you who are maybe at this point, you probably are already gone, but let's just say, for example, you say, hey, you know what? I actually do like Superman and Lois. It is a good show. I think it's objectively good. You're wrong. I liked Halo. I thought everyone who didn't like it was, asking for the wrong things. It was never going to be a recreation of the games. I like Picard. I thought the writing was good. I found the characters interesting. You know what all 3 of those shows have in common? Canceled. Gone. So if they were so good, why aren't they still going? Arrow was good. That went for 8 seasons. Smallville was good. That went for 10 seasons. It ran for a decade.
Flash, there are plenty of bad shows that don't get canceled, though.
Flash would be an example. But Flash got views. So there's did it get views?
I think a better example is Teen Titans Go. Because it's a show that nobody liked, but it has its demographic, right?
Its demographic were not the fans, so the critics are not the ones weighing in on that.
Yeah. So the show is allowed to survive because, it knows what it is, and it's not trying to be good. So it's allowed to survive. But a show like, Supergirl, like Picard, those shows are trying to be like, in touch with the fans. They're trying to be something that they just aren't.
Let's put it this way. Picard and Supergirl, if they were good, they would have found a place for them and they would still be here. There was too much, so they cut them, and because they weren't good. It comes around every quarter, 2 quarters, whenever they do it. They review the show. They say, hey, how are our ratings doing? What is the response to the show? Can we cut it? Can we save some money here? In the specific case of both Flash and Teen Titans Go, Cartoon Network, CW, at the times they're going, and they're going poorly, those networks had nothing else to offer until you don't get cut. And I think in Teen Titan Go's specific case, I was probably getting views because the people watching that don't care about Teen Titans. They just watch that show. But I'm willing to bet the only reason Flash went as long as it did was because the Arrowverse was dead at that point. It was the last one going. The network had nothing else. So they're like, can we just get another season of this so we have something to show? Guarantee you that's probably what it was. But on the flip side of that, there's still plenty of shows that get canceled when they're still good, and it's too soon, right?
Yeah, just look at half the Netflix shows.
Clone Wars.
Clone Wars was canceled for different reasons, though. That one cannot be lumped in with the others.
Yeah, but it's still, if just trying to save from that broad, statement of you only get canceled if you're not good,
Yeah.
And being canceled is different than finishing, right? Like,
exactly.
Avatar only had 3 seasons, so you're like, oh, it only got 3. Well, it's a complete show. It's done.
Yeah.
All you need is 3. And I think Gotham is an interesting example because that was canceled at the time, and it was canceled, not finished, although technically it did both. It got the it was told by the network that you're going to get one more season and you only get 13 episodes or whatever. You're not going to get a full season. So what they were able to do is they were able to finish their show. They were able to write a complete final season 5. So it was canceled, but they were giving a chance to finish it, right?
Yeah.
And I think they lucked out because, if they were allowed to continue, who knows how long they would have gone. Maybe they were aiming for a Smallville 10 seasons. I could not see that. I think they ended it at the perfect time. I think I was lucky. That and Arrow, I think, are lucky to get out when they did, especially seeing how Flash went.
Yeah. Another show on the canceled one. Well, I could think of a couple that jumped to mind, but one that was canceled and allowed to conclude, but did not conclude in a satisfying way. Don't know if you've heard of The Owl House.
I have heard of it. Again, I don't know anything about it. Was that a Disney show?
Yeah, it was one of the good Disney ones. And Disney cut it off after season 2, and it got 3 half-hour specials for its season 3, and that's it. Was not allowed to get its full season 3.
Wow.
Yep.
Thundercats.
Everybody loves that show.
Yeah, I've heard there's a couple of Disney shows that are actually pretty good, but I never was a Disney person, didn't watch them.
Yeah. Another canceled show would be Infinity Train. I always hear people talk about that one.
Yeah. I guess another topic we could get into regarding TV shows would be, I don't know the best word for it. I want to say genre or medium. And this could be many different things. Kind of what we talked about.
That's 2 very different words. I'd like to...
So what I'm getting at here is you have different types of shows. You have streamers. You have full network shows. You have mini-series. And you have things like anime.
Okay, that is definitely medium then.
I would go with medium. So let's start with mini-series. So what would you say the goal is with the mini-series?
Basically, I see a mini-series as basically a kind of a premise that would not exactly work as a full show, but they needed it to be longer than a movie. So they kind of devoted these longer time blocks to tell the story, like a complete story they want to tell. It's not going to get a season 2. It's not going to get like a big spin-off or franchise or anything. The point of a miniseries is to be a complete story package in one season. So going into it, it's going to be a complete thing. It's going to be as it stands. And they have the resources that, they're allotted to work with the story they want to tell. Whatever they tell in that series, that is the story. That is what you're going to get.
I would say typically a miniseries just does not exceed 10 episodes. I can't think of one that has. But I think the key that you said there was does not get a season 2. It's a complete story, one season, episodes 1 through 10 or whatever it is, and that's it. That's all you get. And the point is complete there. Complete. There is no more anything after. Or it's a prequel series, so there's already something after, but it's done already,
Yeah.
I think the term miniseries has been thrown around too much, not by like people, but by like studios. They're, especially Disney, they don't understand what a miniseries is anymore. They called Kenobi, I think, a miniseries. I think there was a couple that they were calling a miniseries, and I think Kenobi was one of them.
I know Book of Boba Fett, I think, was one of them.
It was supposed to be a miniseries. But then guess what? The second that the seasons are done, and it turns out they actually got some viewership, they say, oh, we're in talks for a season 2. We're trying to see if they'll come back. The actors will come back. And so that's not a miniseries. You can't do that. You can't say it's a miniseries. Tell your audience, what they're going into. They finish it and then be like, oh, season 2. Same thing happened with Shogun. You heard of that one? It's on FX. It was highly praised. It's like a 9 out of 10 or something, at least, from what I've heard. It did so well. They're trying to do a season 2. They're trying to write a season 2 when it didn't exist. Like it was based on like a story or something.
Yeah.
And it was like a 10 out of 10, whatever. It was excellent, but it did so well. They're like, we want more.
Well, that's something that happened with Game of Thrones. They ran out of the actual book material to work off of, and then the show immediately nosedived off a cliff. So,
see, you can't get greedy like that. This is why I think HBO is probably the only one who does this right. Because you have Band of Brothers is the golden example of a miniseries. It's done so well. Sure, they followed it up with a couple more shows, or at least for them, it was just Pacific. But that was like 10 years later, and it was a different show with different actors. It wasn't a season 2. They was done. Chernobyl's another really good one. I think that one's like 4 or 5 episodes. It's really well done, but it tells the story it needs to do.
I want to bring up Penguin here, though, because originally it was called a miniseries.
Yes.
And now it is in talks of getting a season 2.
Yes, which I don't think will happen. And again, this is bad. I think streaming in particular is ruining the term miniseries because they have the option now of just doing more if they want. It's that easy for them. This is not the writers. This is not the actors. They're not saying, hey, I really liked Penguin season 2. I want more, or I really like Penguin. I want more work. I want to keep doing this. Can we do a season 2? That's not them. This is the top, right? The top studios. They're saying, hey, this did very well, and it was very highly acclaimed. Let's do a season 2. And probably Matt Reeves or whoever's in charge is like, no, this was supposed to be one season. It's like, oh, I'm sure you can write another one. That's got to be what's happening, right? That is what's happening with these miniseries that are going on longer than they were ever planned to.
You just saying, oh, you can just write another one, that just made me upset, and that just.
But is that wrong though? But that's probably what's happening.
That's exactly what they would say, and that's why it makes me so upset, because that's not how it works.
Right.
That they don't get that.
They don't get that a complete story is a complete story. Like that's it. That's it. There's no more. It's done. You know what done means?
here's an interesting example. I think that's why Korra, The Legend of Korra, didn't do nearly as well as Avatar, because there was never supposed to be a sequel series to Avatar.
That's part of
Like,
it. So
Avatar was just supposed to be a complete story. So when they were asked to write a new one, you know, they could write something, but it wasn't going to be the same because it wasn't the story that, you know, they had wanted to tell.
right. I think so. That's a really good example. I think Korra's problem comes down to premise ultimately, but that's because, again, like you said, The Last Airbender was pitched as a season 1 to 3 complete premise of this specific cast of characters in this specific conflict. There wasn't anything planned afterwards, you know, because this premise was so strong. So in this specific case, I think the universe and world that The Last Airbender set up was so good, everyone wanted a sequel series, whether it was with the same characters or a different character, right? Because it would have been a waste to not do anything else with the world. You still have your complete show, so it would have been a different show. It's not like a season 4, right?
Right.
So Korra's problem was, first of all, premise, because you're missing the war. You're missing the conflict, all this interesting stuff. So your premise is already lacking. Not to say that you couldn't have ever come up with a better premise, and not to say that their premise is particularly bad. I think everyone would agree it's just not as interesting as The Last Airbender. I think the other thing that hurts it is its characters. Having an older cast of characters was particularly interesting, especially when they're written as if they're supposed to be the same age as the previous cast of characters. Did you catch that when you watched the show?
I more so noticed that, like, they wanted the characters to be more mature, but they didn't realize that, you know, the previous cast was already that mature at the younger age because of the war setting.
The previous cast is way more
feeling
mature
lesser
than Korra's cast.
Yeah, they ended up feeling lesser because they didn't have to deal with, you know, nearly the situations that, or the personal struggles that the previous cast had to. So despite appearing more mature on a surface level, on further examination, it kind of falls apart.
I think the best word to describe Korra would be shaky. It's not, I wouldn't go bad. I wouldn't say it's bad, but you're just missing, and it's not as good, right? And it's so tough trying to follow up a 10 out of 10 like that.
Yeah, but I don't think anything ever could have been as good in the same universe because it was never intended to have a follow-up story.
Right.
This isn't like Star Wars where, you know, Lucas had the outlines for a complete saga, basically, when he invented the first movie. It's not like that.
Right. But you still could have done better. You could have tried something new, and they didn't really. They limited themselves in setting and premise and all this stuff. It's a whole thing. But this will be another discussion, maybe not a podcast. We'll see what we end up doing with it. But that kind of like directors that I don't like, movie directors. Remember that Dennis guy who did the Dune movies, and he had a bunch of bad takes and all that stuff?
Wait, what was the really bad one again?
Well, something like it was either the runtime one, or he was saying something like, I know for sure he wanted to make a movie with like no dialogue in it or something. Or that was the bad take. He was like, good characters don't need dialogue or something, or like dialogue doesn't make iconic characters or something like that. Something stupid, where it's like, okay, let's remove all the dialogue from Jack Sparrow or Batman or something. It's like, what character do you have left? What are you talking about?
See, that's not a take I disagree with, like, on a surface level, but upon further examination, it's just like, you're missing so much. Even WALL-E, my favorite movie of all time, like, the characters have dialogue, and it's not like what they say all the time that's especially meaningful to their character, but how they say it.
It's how they
just the way they pronounce their words.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much in the inflection alone that tells you about the character. Yeah. And you can't get that if they don't say a thing.
He's basically saying that any animated character ever is garbage. It's more or less what he's saying. Or that's what you could take from it anyway. But anyway, his most recent take was someone asked him if he wanted to do a Star Wars movie. And he said he has no interest in Star Wars. And he hasn't had any interest in Star Wars since Return of the Jedi ruined it for him. Yeah. He said, I think his quote specifically was, "I was so upset with that movie, I wanted to drive to LA and have a talk with George Lucas." As if he was someone who could just do that. And this was like 40 years ago. So he must have been like 20 or something.
I never understood. You know what? I'm gonna head this off now.
I don't want to get into it later, but
yeah, we're just gonna cut off the whole Star Wars elitism talk because
it's easily the worst thing about the franchise or the fan base.
Yeah, we're gonna head that off, and we're like somewhat guilty of it as well with the sequels, but that's like a different discussion.
But
than the elitism talk, because there's a difference between
that one. I mentioned this.
There's just like a difference between the elitism of like, this movie is terrible, why would you enjoy it? As opposed to like, you know, I don't like this movie, I don't think it's Star Wars, but whatever, you know.
What was you just watched like a 12-hour video about Attack of the Clones, and it wasn't even...
Yeah.
It was only like the first 20 minutes or something?
Yeah, and they were going into detail and everything, and the quality alone just spoke to that movie. And, if you can dislike the movie all you want, all right? Fine.
Exactly.
But like, the amount of effort and quality that went into every detail, that is just something that does not exist in bad movies and bad shows.
It means that at some level you cared. You care about it. Whether you dislike it or don't, you care about it enough to make a 12-hour highly edited video about it.
Well, somebody cared enough to do that, and somebody, liked it enough to go into that much detail and point out all the things that they did like, and even the things they didn't like.
And I'm guessing it had a decent amount of views too?
Yeah.
Well, there's you go. There's at least 100,000 probably people.
And on bad shows, you will not find people talking about, the positive small things like this. They won't go into detail on these small, cool, like world building or character moments that make up a good piece of media, because the bad pieces of media don't have these small moments. They fail at this smaller level. They fail upon scrutiny because they don't put in effort. They don't have an understanding of what makes something good or memorable.
I'm so glad you said that. We don't have much time left. I'll touch on a couple quick things here. Small moments make everything in shows, because small moments make everything in characters. It's all small moments. Superman and Lois has only bad small moments. So that's all you remember, and that's all you get from it. I don't hear anyone talking about Superman and Lois outside of what I look up about the reviews of the show. So, of course, the only reason it's being praised is because the only people who stuck around are the people who like it anyway. But no one's talking about it. It's not trending on Twitter. There's no discussion about it. The DC fan base doesn't care. I saw more discussion about Cape Crusader than I did Superman and Lois. And that was like a thing for like a week. And I still want to watch that. But small moments, just to touch on it like briefly, anime excels at this. Anime is all characters. It's like 99% character.
And I want to bring up just one quick example from on my end. I said WALL-E was my favorite movie earlier. One of my favorite scenes of the movie. This has nothing to do with like basically anything except just, the character. Just this small, quiet moment of WALL-E looking up the stars and pressing record on himself. That's it. It's like nothing else in that scene. There's not even, like, the score is just like barely even there.
It's always the little things. Toradora is a show which is very controversial for me, not for in any bad way, but it's very good. But that show, again, 100% character. That is the ultimate example of small moments, little moments. There's some big scenes, but the whole thing is so down to earth. It's all small moments between characters. And then when you get to those big moments, those little things that you remembered along the way, they just hit you, and it's unfair, I would put it.
Well, it's the small moments that make the big moments matter. If you don't get to know like about the characters or about the world on a smaller, more personal level, the big spectacle will not matter as much, because why should you care?
You can't watch the big moments out of context and get it. Like the ending scene for Social Network. Andrew Garfield does his whole thing.
Yeah.
Amazing scene. It's the best scene in the whole movie. But out of context, all you get from that is he's a good actor.
Right.
But when you watch the movie and you get to that scene, it's a whole other thing. It just it makes the movie, honestly. But there's so many examples of that. We hit an hour, so we're gonna kind of wind it down. Was there any other like show examples or any points? I think we kind of covered it all. I mean, the main point here is it's down to really characters, writing, premise. You know, there's so many examples of just like, why is this a show? This is not interesting, right? Isn't that what you always say to a show that you don't like? It's always, it's not interesting. You don't say that about movies. You just say it was bad, right? I didn't like the movie. You never say it wasn't interesting, sometimes, but for a show, it's always, it was not interesting, because you need a premise to hook someone to get them to invest their time in a long-term show. And I don't care if it's a short show or miniseries, it's still long-term. Anything longer than a movie is long-term.
I'm just amazed and impressed with ourselves that we went this whole time without blasting the Acolyte a single time.
Ugh. Well, I mean, that's pretty simple. Bad characters, bad everything. Premise? This is a bad premise? What was
yes.
What's the premise?
The premise is fundamentally flawed.
Oh, their premise, yes. The premise that they promised was not flawed.
Dark side force user killing Jedi during the height of the High Republic is fundamentally flawed.
That premise is bad. A show following the early Sith before Phantom Menace, that premise is not bad. That's the premise everyone wanted to watch.
Yeah.
But that's not what we got. But anyway, so yeah, if you made it this far, thank you. We're going to, next one we'll be talking about specifically The Flash. We didn't get too much into it here because that deserves a deep dive.
Oh, I have words.
Yeah, but go ahead and comment, I guess, whatever shows you think are either good or bad and why. And if you can point out the things that we mentioned, like, is it a certain character that draws you in? The premise was just got you hooked, all this stuff, you know? Yeah, that's it. I don't remember how you do these outros, but...
Well, thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll actually work on more of these. I know Nick's put in effort on trying to edit some of these, but it's been a little bit slow. Not really in his control. But we will try to get a few more of these out there.
All right. See you on the next one.